You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. It is season 2, episode 82, assessing the Cubs outfield. Don't forget to listen, download, review, and most importantly, subscribe to the podcast and to follow us on the socials, Fly the W670 on Twitter, Instagram, and of course on Facebook, or email us at flythew670@gmail.com. Crawly, we are just about ready for first pitch in the World Series. Hope you're having a good week.
Yeah, it's been, it was a surprising end to the NLCS. We'll get to that. But, it's, I think some people like to complain it's not the big marquee New York, LA matchups. I just care what's the best baseball I'm going to see. And I wish other people would look at it that way as well,
Well, I'll give it its chance. I have been poo-pooing the matchup. I will admit that. But part of that, Crawly, part of my poo-pooing of the matchup is because of the Diamondbacks, right? I mean, we were potentially a catch by the right fielder away from potentially making the postseason, right, and keeping the Snakes out of the postseason. I know we're going to assess the outfield in just a minute, but that's why in this situation, I'm usually always a National League guy. I don't think I can be pulling for the Snakes, but we'll get to that in a minute. Let's assess the outfield. Earlier in the week, we assessed the infield. Now let's go into the Cubs outfield.
Yeah, as we're looking at these World Series teams and trying to evaluate where the Cubs kind of line up, the thing is what are the areas of needs? And there's obviously a big question as far as the outfield is concerned is center field and what's going to happen. When we look at each of these positions, Dustin, we used WAR, wins above replacement. It's a stat that measures position players with their value for all facets of the game, how many more wins they're worth compared to a replacement level player. It takes into account everything: batting, base running, and fielding. That's why, when you sit there and you take a look at when we did shortstop this last week, the last episode, obviously Dansby Swanson is the best defender out of all the shortstops, but offensively he's worth a little less than other shortstops, and that's why the Cubs were 4th or 5th as opposed to 1st. So it kind of factors everything in. That's why it's a good stat to look at. And so when we look at left field, in 2022, we knew Ian Happ was going to be the everyday left fielder. We just didn't know for how long. It looked like Wilson, Contreras, and Ian were going to be traded in 2022, but neither were. And Ian was ready to start the season without an extension. But on April 12th, Ian and the Cubs agreed to a 3-year, $61 million extension. And so that's going to solidify left field. 5 different players are going to start at left field this season for the Cubs, but the majority is going to be Ian Happ. Ian started 154 games at left, Christopher Morel 4, Mike Tauchman 3, Patrick Wisdom 2, and Nelson Velasquez got 1 start. So the Cubs ranked 7th out of 30th teams in the left field position with a WAR of 3, which isn't bad, but that's down from last season when the Cubs were 3rd out of 30 with a WAR of 3.9. And the reason the Cubs dropped this season was that Ian Happ took a step back, both offensively and defensively. In 2022, Ian Happ had the best season of his career. He slashed .271, .342, .440 with 17 home runs and 72 RBIs. But the way that Ian played last year got him the All-Star nod in 2022. And so the Cubs were definitely hoping to see some more of that. Unfortunately, in 2023, Ian slashed .248, .360, .431 with 20 home runs and 84 RBIs. His average was 30 points lower this season, and his on-base and slugging stayed about the same. He's a guy that he gets on base pretty well, but just seeing that average drop, I think, really hurt. On defense, it was even worse.
But he walks a ton, right? He walks a ton. That's where the slug comes for him, right?
Right. He walks a ton, and as far as his home runs, they were he actually had more home runs this year than last year. Mm-hmm. The issue, when you look at it's 17 last year and 21 this year. It just was a matter of striking out a lot as well. And so you hope that, for me, I was always wondering, we questioned a lot why Ian was always batting 3rd. It always seemed like maybe, the Cubs really didn't have a bona fide leadoff hitter. And it seemed like, Mike Tauchman filled that role for a little bit. We're going to talk about Tauchman, shortly. But I think that, it's just, I need a guy that can hit me 40 bombs, something like that, batting 3rd. It just, 30, 40 bombs. I just feel like it was a lot of times where he had runners on base and kind of didn't come through. On defense, it was even worse. In 2022, Ian was 4th in outs above average with 2 and 1st in defensive runs saved amongst left fielders in the National League. He won his first Gold Glove in left. Somehow he got nominated this year. We talked about this. He ranked 30th in outs above average. So 2022 he was 4th in outs above average. This year he was 30th. And last year in 2022, he was 7th as far as DRS, and then this year he was -7. So it just wasn't a good year offensively, it was an okay year offensively. Again, hits weren't there as much. The average was down. But defensively, I think he took a step back, and I'm still scratching my head as how he got nominated for a Gold Glove based on what I saw.
Right. We talked about that a few weeks back or a few episodes back, the fact that he was nominated again for the Gold Glove. But, he had really raised the bar awfully high. So that's why we were looking at him to do a little bit more than he did. He was okay. My biggest issue is the third spot. I mean, if anything, if you were really pushing, I could even see him batting leadoff because of the amount of walks he takes. But third is just crazy, I think.
I think what drove people nuts is that, in general, baseball and the numbers come up, you want your best hitter to get as many at-bats as possible, and that's going to happen if he's batting third. And so every time
first, second, or third.
Right. But when you're thinking about more like the power numbers, you know what I mean? You really want a couple guys in front of you. You want him batting third. And I just cannot count the amount of times that, the inning ended with Ian Happ looking at a pitch and, Cody Bellinger, who's hitting the lights out of the ball, is sitting there, on deck and the innings ends. So that's what drives me nuts. And like I said, he was literally the best left fielder last year as far as defensive runs saved. And this year he went down to 7th. Is that bad? No, but it's still a drop. And that's why it was kind of, to me, a frustrating year for Ian.
Yeah, definitely frustrating. No doubt about that. He is a good teammate with the Bernstein and Holmes show also on 670 The Score. All right, let's move into center field, and hopefully there's not going to be a gaping hole in center field.
Well, when the Dodgers decided not to offer Cody Bellinger a contract in 2023, the Cubs took advantage. They signed a 1-year prove-it deal, 1 year, $17.5 million, and it was a gamble that paid off handsomely for both sides. Cody Bellinger played the most games in first with 81, followed by Mike Tauchman, 64. Christopher Morel played 10 games in center field. PCA is going to play 3, Nelson Velasquez 3, and Alexander Canario 1. The Cubs ranked 5th out of 30 teams at the center field position with looking at the wins above replacement with a WAR of 4.1. And the main reason was the phenomenal season by Cody Bellinger, who bet on himself, and now it's going to pay off for him. Cody slashed 307, 356, 525 with 26 home runs and 97 RBIs. Now, Dustin, when he was playing center field, I talked about it, excessively. He was by far one of the best center fielders I've ever seen in my lifetime as a Cub fan, and as far as the defense is concerned. What a heck of a year offensively. Now, remember, Cody's going to get injured in May, and then Mike Tauchman will be called up from AAA and was able to help fill in while Bellinger was on the IL. He hit 355 in limited time in May, but then in June he dropped to 225. But Tauchman really, hit his stride with Bellinger in July. He hit 273. But then after July, Tauchman's numbers dropped to 237 average in August and 229 in September. So I think Tauchman's one of those great fill-in players, but once he starts playing every day, he's going to get found out. And that's what he did. He struggled in a lot of August and September.
Yeah, he struggled when it mattered the most, no doubt about that. But he also had a couple of brilliant plays, did Mike Tauchman, that really kept the Cubs in this thing.
And some clutch hits as well. But when you look at center field, Dustin, you're going to laugh because last year the Cubs were 2022, the Cubs were 28th in all of baseball at center field. Wow. And they jumped all the way up to 5th because of Bellinger. So from 28th
a massive jump,
to 5th. In 2022, Christopher Morel, Rafael Ortega, Nelson Velasquez, Jason Hayward, Michael Hermosillo, Ian Happ, Patrick Wisdom, and Narciso Crook all played center. How many people could guess that many names in 2022, right?
Yeah, if you gave me, maybe I could get up to 3, probably, maybe 4, but yeah, that's wild.
In 2023, top center field prospect Pete Crow Armstrong was called up on September 11th to play defense and run the bases. PCA appeared in 13 games, but Dustin, he only started 3. He only finished 2 of those games. And so in 9 of those games, he got 1 or less at bat. So he got 14 at bats total. So right. I think Cub fans are absolutely, they saw what they saw, which was very high pressure situations, and the kid gets one at bat a game. You know how hard that is to do that? I mean, that's just ridiculous. And so I think,
not nearly a big enough sample size, of course not.
No. But if the Cubs re-sign Cody Bellinger, which is a big if at this point, I think it'll be a first baseman or possibly as left fielder. If a trade is made, who knows? But I think the center field position belongs to PCA as far as the future is concerned. There's going to be ups and downs, but the organization believes he's a star in the making. But you are going to need, a couple of guys to help out to make sure that there's not that much weight put on the shoulders of PCA. But I'm going to dream about an outfield of PCA and Cody Bellinger in there. That would just be unreal.
All right. I like the idea. I'm not against it. So that means what? You're trading Ian Happ then?
Yeah. If that, and nobody's saying that's going to happen, but Ian Happ is a guy like you said, he puts up decent numbers. He's a guy that is very well liked in the clubhouse. He's been nominated for the Marvin Miller Man of the Year award, all sorts of things. And so it's not a bad contract. It's a 2-year contract left after this year. So we'll see what happens. But for me, I really feel like, if Cody Bellinger doesn't want to play first, maybe he can play left. Who knows? Maybe Ian can play first.
Well, now there's an interesting question, Crawly. Do you think that there's something there? Do you think that Cody Bellinger, when and if he re-signs with the Cubs, do you think there is a little nugget about that? I am a center fielder.
I don't know if it has to be center fielder, but I think he'd prefer to play the outfield, and right now with the season he had, he can kind of make those kind of demands.
He can dictate what he wants to do. All right. Right field, Crawly. It seems to be pretty nailed down moving forward, but definitely something we need to talk about.
Right. Remember, it's the middle of spring training in 2022 that the Cubs signed Seiya Suzuki as a free agent. As long as he's healthy, he's been the starting right fielder in 130 games. Mike Tauchman started in 10, Christopher Morel 7. You had Miles Mastrobuoni 5, Patrick Wisdom 3, Trey Mancini 3 games, Nelson Velasquez started 3 games, and Alexander Canario started 1. As far as right field concerned, the Cubs ranked 10th out of 30 teams at right field when looking at the win above replacement stat with 2.9. That was better in 2022 than the Cubs ranked 18th out of 30 with a WAR of 1.4. So in 2022, Dustin, you had Suzuki, Nelson Velasquez, Jason Hayward, Rafael Ortega, Patrick Wisdom, Clint Frazier, Narciso Crook, Franmil Reyes, Jared Young, Alfonso Rivas, and Michael Hermosillo all starting in center. So when we look at these, Dustin, when we looked at the infield and the outfield, it's funny to see some of those names in 2022 and realize how bad that team was, how it had absolutely no depth on that team.
Yeah, very, very little depth and a couple of names that only a real diehard would even remember. So,
yeah, in 2023, Seiya got off to a slow start. He showed up to spring training completely jacked up, if you remember. A lot of muscle he put on. But he pulled an oblique, and then he missed the WBC and all of spring training. So, Dustin, that's the second season in a row that he really, truly hasn't had a spring training, and it does make a difference. You have to kind of get your reps in, and you're not just going to start without doing that. And so I think he was rushed back because of the disaster that was happening on April, in right field. He came back April 14th, and I don't know who decided that, if this was Hoyer or Ross, but they decided to give starts to Miles Mastrobuoni, Trey Mancini, and Patrick Wisdom, all infielders. And
the Trey Mancini one was the worst one. I think that really might have messed him up.
And I think that Nelson Velasquez, I never understood. He was a top outfield prospect. He started the same amount of games as Mancini and Wisdom and less than Miles Mastrobuoni. Velasquez was called up on April 10th. He played 1 game on April 11th, went 3 for 4 with a grand slam, and didn't get another start and was optioned back to Iowa on April 15th. He was called back up on April 25th, started a couple games in left, right, and DH before being sent to Iowa on May 8th. He would be traded to the Kansas City Royals in exchange for Jose Cuas in August. But once he was called up by KC, he hit 5 home runs in August and 9 in September. Would have been nice if the Cubs did,
Of course he did. They could have used a little bit pop, a little healthy, fresh legs in that late September push. There's no doubt about that.
Right. And so when Seiya came back from his oblique, he hit 254 in April. Again, you knew he was going to start slow. Then 319 in May before he went in an awful 2-month slump, hitting 177 in June and 240 in July before David Ross benched him for the first couple games in August. That would prove to be a pivotal moment as Seiya would turn it around. He would hit 321 for August and carry the team in September, hitting 370 in September. But, Dustin, as we kind of look at the outfield, we know for the most part, chances are Ian Happ is going to be back in left. You're going to have Seiya Suzuki in right. And then the question is, who's going to be manning in center field? And I think if the Cubs are going to take that next step forward, if they are going to be the team that makes it to the postseason instead of falling just short, it really has to be Ian Happ and Seiya Suzuki that are going to have to carry the load, the full season. These are the guys that you're building around. These are part of the core. We talked about Dansby Swanson. He's never been like a big offensive numbers guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
You need to get that on. And Nico is a guy that's going to get on base and run some bases, but you need Ian Happ and Seiya Suzuki to provide the thunder. You need them to hit home runs, hit doubles, those type of things. And Ian has to get back to that all-star that he was in 2022 and a legit gold glover like he was in 2022. And they need Seiya to be healthy for a full spring training and to be the player he was in August and September for the entire season. What you're looking at is that because of the bad start that the Cubs had, that's where David Ross can't have patience with guys like Nelson Velasquez, because if a bunch of guys are struggling, you can't have a rookie in there struggling as well. You get what I'm saying? Yep. You need guys that are your veterans to really provide that stability and give guys like PCA, give guys like Matt Mervis. These are guys that just weren't able to really develop, like Nelson Velasquez, because you couldn't have that many guys not hitting in a lineup during at any stretch of the time. If you just have like one or two guys not hitting and everyone else is hitting fine, then it's okay if PCA is struggling at the plate. Then it's okay if Matt Mervis is struggling at the plate, but you can't have everybody struggling and then still have those guys in there as automatic outs.
No, absolutely not. You nailed that one as you usually do, Crawly. Great assessment of the Cubs outfield, no doubt. This is the Fly the W670 podcast. It is episode number 82 of season 2. We were just assessing the Cubs outfield. Don't forget to listen, download, review, and subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Crawly, let's go over a little Cubs-related news and a little bit of league news.
Yeah, you're taking a look here. As we talked about on the last episode, Dusty Baker has announced his retirement today on Thursday as we record this. As a manager, Dusty managed for 26 seasons. He finished 7th all-time in wins. He was a 3-time manager of the year. He won 3 pennants and finally won the World Series in 2022. He is a surefire Hall of Famer. But for Cub fans, I think Dusty will be remembered for managing that 2003 team that came so close to winning another pennant for Dusty, and the first since 1945 for the Cubs at the time. And it just fell apart. And I think for people like me, there are just bad memories associated with Dusty. I know every baseball writer and whatever love him to death, and he's a great interview and yada yada yada, and all the the things that come along, all the high praises. I get it. I guess for a guy like me, I'll always remember, like I said, McKeenan out managing him in Game 6 and Game 7, and then that 2004. If you remember that team and just the awful collapse that team went through. And that was when Dusty Baker got in a fight with Steve Stone. That's when Kent Merker called up to the press box. Steve Stone lost his job after that season. And so did Chip Carey. And I just always felt that Dusty didn't have control of the clubhouse. I felt that there, he always blamed a lot of people. And when you're the manager, the buck stops with you. I'm sorry. And I never felt that Dusty took the guy. It was just a lot of things that just drove me nuts. Whether it was, pitching Mark Pryor 135 pitches in a meaningless game, or whether it was, starting Nafi Perez every day, like just dumb things. It just went sour for me. And I was a guy that literally had a "In Dusty We Trusty" shirt, and I still have it because I never get rid of anything Cubs related. But that was about as close as I've ever come to burning Cubs memorabilia.
Oh, gosh. You got to try to drag that out for one of these episodes. We need to
I'll drag it out.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I mentioned that. I said, I get that Dusty Baker is a Hall of Fame manager. I saw a stat today, Crawly, that Dusty Baker has been involved as a manager or player in 3% of every Major League Baseball game ever played.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
He's been around a long time. No longer with the Cubs, Crawly, is Craig Breslow. He leaves the Cubs and he is now in charge of the Red Sox.
Yep, we saw this coming. We had been reporting about it for a while, and Craig Breslow was named the new chief baseball officer. So he's number one in charge. That's their title for it. For the Cubs, it's president baseball ops. It's Theo. Well, that's Breslow's position now.
Mm-hmm.
For the Cubs, Breslow was an assistant GM and senior vice president of pitching. We talked about all the great things that he had done as far as the pitching infrastructure, and it leaves a hole right now as far as the Cubs are concerned. And I don't know who fills it. I'm sure, there's going to be a period of silence now. That's why there's a lot of news going on right now, because they don't want it happening during the World Series. But hopefully Theo's got his Rolodex out and he's got somebody for the position that can do as good as Craig did, because Craig was an impressive guy. And I think, Boston really, I think he was their main target the entire time.
Well, Jed brought in Carter Hawkins from Cleveland, and Carter's background is pitching, so maybe that helps and it'll offset this loss a little bit. We'll have to wait and see. Another Cubs front office guy might be moving about.
Dustin, this is killing me because John Morosi is reporting that the Mets have had discussions of hiring Dan Kantrovitz to oversee scouting and player development. Dan Kantrovitz has been on our podcast, friend of the pod. I think Dan is I think the world of Dan. I've seen him and what he's done with the Oakland A's and the St. Louis Cardinals, and now what he's done with the Cubs since 2020. The Cubs have just drafted fantastically under him 2020, 21, 22, 23. The Breslow one I saw coming. The Kantrovitz, I did not. And like I said, Big Daddy Steve Cohen is going to be throwing those dollars around. And so, David Stearns leaves Milwaukee. He heads over to New York. And obviously Milwaukee and New York know each other, or Milwaukee and the Cubs know each other very well. And so I'm sure, that was high on Stearns' list, is to get Kantrovitz over there. Also high on Stearns' list, as we've talked about, I mentioned it before the season even started, Craig Counsell will be interviewing for the Mets job.
Craig Tober moving over there. Mm-hmm. Craig Timber, because he doesn't really do much in October.
Well, here's the thing, Dustin, is you can, as far as the Craig Tober or whatever you want to say it, this guy gets the best out of, he makes gasoline out of goat piss is the way I would put it. I mean, he literally takes, he literally takes teams, that you sit there and you're like, oh my God, like how are these teams competing? And every year he puts it in there. And so here's the thing. And I saw this tweet today that was talking about, the teams that have basically, like every team that has made it to the World Series has gone through Milwaukee, right? That if you're looking at this, right?
6 degrees of the Brewers, right?
Right. Every team the Brewers have ever lost to in the postseason has gone on to play in the World Series. That's 5 times in the last 6 years and 9 times in their 53 of their history. 6 of those 8 have won the World Series that far. But I think, when we do talk about the NLCS and the ALCS, it's way random. It's way more random than a season. And so whether, Craig Counsell's the best manager, the worst manager, throw it all out the door when that postseason starts, because you never know what's going to happen. Nobody predicted
look
a
at
Rangers.
This season. Yeah, right. Yeah. Look at this season. I mean, come on. If you would have picked that matchup, before the season started, it wouldn't even matter who wins the World Series. You'd be lighting cigars with $100 bills. So
Circus Sports would have been paying.
Yeah. Anything is possible. Anything is possible. All right, Andy Green, he might be on the move as well.
Yep, bench coach for the Cubs is interviewed for the Cleveland Guardians managerial job, vacated when Tito retired, right? Terry Francona, and so Andy Green is a really solid manager, and it doesn't surprise me. There's going to be a lot of job openings. We already know Dusty's gone, Francona's gone. New York has an opening.
Padres have an opening. That was kind of odd, right? The Padres skipper Black jumps ship, leaves the Padres, and heads to the Giants.
Well, here's the thing, Dustin, and again, we talked about our friend Kevin from Palatine, my buddy.
I got an update on that, by the way.
Oh God, here we go. And
finish that thought, and then I'll give you the update.
Yeah, but here's the thing is that you can sit there and say, oh, just spend however you want. There are consequences, and it's not just financial. They're going to take away draft picks. They're going to take away money for international free agents, the way that you keep your farm system stocked. So take a look at what's going to happen with the Padres. They are going to try to shed salary. And that's one way to shed salary. You got a high price manager, you get rid of him, you get a guy that's a lot less. And it sounds like they're going with an internal candidate that's not going to cost them as much. There's rumors already that the Yankees are already all over Juan Soto. So you're going to watch these guys start to shed salary.
That could be a bit of good news. Okay. That could be, I don't see the Yankees landing Juan Soto and Cody Bellinger. So that could be a bit of good news.
Let's hope so. What do you got for Kevin?
Kevin called in, heard us chatting about him on the Mully and Haw show, and saying that, we wanted to talk to him. So he called in, and he's happy to join the podcast, got his phone number. So we just need to let him know. We were kind of scrambling to get this one recorded, so I didn't think it was the best one to try to shove it in. So we'll find a date, though. He's a good dude.
Yeah, no. I think it's hilarious. And so it'd be funny to have his opinion on these things. But one last bit of news. Andy Martinez, friend of the pod and beat writer for Marquee Sports, reports that Brad Boxberger and Cody Hewer are set to start throwing programs in November. You remember that Boxberger had the dreaded right forearm strain that seemed to infect every Cub that pitched this year.
Right.
And Cody Hewer you remember that was the one where he was coming back from Tommy John. He threw a pitch for the iCubs and it looked like his elbow exploded. It was a fracture in his elbow, but he's going to be resuming a throwing program in November. So just all the best.
He was part of the deal with the White Sox, right?
Yeah. With Nick Magical. Yeah. For Craig Kimbrell.
Yeah.
Who's probably not the most popular guy in Philly right now.
Right. They Cubs obviously are going to need some bullpen help. Fulmer's going to be out all of next year. He's not going to be around. So hope to get these guys up healthy, and the Cubs are probably going to have to buy a couple of guys and then figure out which guys are not going to start, which guys are going to throw in the bullpen, but all things that we can continue to talk about right here on the Fly, the W670 podcast. You're listening to episode 82. It's season 2, assessing the Cubs outfield. We did that a little bit earlier. And now, Crawly, want to remind everybody to not forget to listen, download, review, and subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Hit us up with one of those 5-star reviews. It's time to recap the NLCS. We recapped the ALCS last time. The Rangers are into the postseason. Talked about it a little bit. The D-backs are also in, but an amazing way that they got there.
Yeah, it really was shocking that, the Diamondbacks were the last team to make in a postseason spot. They get in there, and then we said they were hot, but so were the Phillies. And so when the Phillies jumped out to that 2-0 lead, I'm thinking to myself, okay, they got this no problem. And then when the D-backs came back to tie it in Arizona 2-2, when the Phillies won game 6, you're watching game 6, right? And you have this matchup between marquee pitching matchup between Merrill Kelly and upcoming free agent Aaron Nola, who everybody's buzzing about. The D-backs, when they lost game 5 and they have to go back to Philly down 3-2, I'm thinking to myself, there's no way the Phillies don't take this. And, right away in the second inning, Tommy Pham and Lourdes Gurriel hit solo home runs, and Evan Longoria doubled to score Alec Thomas. And the D-backs are up in game 6, 3-0. The Phillies' Brandon Marsh shingled to score JT Realmuto to make it 3-1 in the bottom of the second. But Ketel Marte would hit an RBI triple in the 5th and an RBI single in the 7th. And Arizona would win this one 5-1 and force a game 7. Nola went 4.1 innings, gave up 4 runs on 6 hits, 2 solo home runs. Kelly pitched 5 innings of 1-run ball, and Schwarber, Turner, Harper, and Castellanos were all 0 for 4.
How about that? I mean, oof. Boy, those guys who were slugging early, they just seem like they forgot how to hit.
And it's hard to believe, Dustin, but the Phillies have been a franchise since 1883. And so the other night they played their first game 7 in their history, while the Diamondbacks, who have been around only since 1998, are playing their second time. If you remember, they played in 2001 after 9/11, that World Series against the Yankees, and that game 7 with the, do you remember who started the rally in that inning?
Don't.
That was Mark Grace. who helped start that rally. And later on, Luis Gonzalez was the one that drove in the winning run.
Luis
so.
Gonzalez,
Yeah, a lot of stuff. So in game 7, Arizona's Brandon Pfaadt took on Ranger Suarez of the Phillies. D-backs got on the board first when they put runners at the corners with 1 out, and Christian Walker grounded out to make it 1-0. Alec Boehm tied the game up for the Phillies when he hit a solo home run in the bottom of the 2nd. The bottom of the 4th with 1 out, Alex Boehm walked, and Bryson Stott doubled to put the Phils up 2-1. The Phillies loaded the bases with 2 outs, but Johan Rojas struck out to end the threat. And Dustin, that's one of those things, you know, God, game 7 of the World Series, bases loaded, 2 outs. And boy, would the Phillies end up regretting leaving those runners there on 4th in the 4th, you know?
Yes, they would. Yes, they would.
Because sure enough, right after that happens, you get that momentum shift. The D-backs would tie it up in the top of the 5th on a Corbin Carroll single. He would then steal second and score on a Gabriel Moreno single as the Snakes retook the lead 3-2. And then Carroll would hit a RBI sac fly in the 7th to make it 4-2. And that's how the game would end in stunning fashion with the Diamondbacks headed to the World Series. Carroll would finish the game, Dustin, with 3 hits, 2 runs, 2 RBIs, and stole 2 bases. So he single-handedly defeated the Phillies in their home park. But
he had a really nice series, yeah.
Ketel Marte was named the MVP, but Dustin, when I look at Carroll, that's what I think Cub fans are envisioning as far as PCA is concerned.
Oh, your lips to God's ears, yep. Mm-hmm.
You look at the way that guy just runs the bases with abandon, just how fast he is. And I think that, you know, with PCA, there's going to be a little bit of adjustment, but boy, oh boy, that's when I saw that, that's all I kept thinking about is, you know, imagine PCA leading off and Nico second, you know, and boy, oh boy, you got something going there. Whenever Carroll was getting on, it just felt like something was going to happen.
Yep, no doubt. He's an exciting, very, very exciting player. I don't know that America is ready to gravitate to him, going back to what we talked about a little bit earlier in the pod about not having the marquee matchups. I would have much rather watched Phillies against the Rangers than Diamondbacks against the Rangers, but I will be watching Crawly. So that leads us to it. We've got a World Series, Rangers, Diamondback. Rangers a big favorite, minus 180, meaning you have to bet $180 to win $100 on them. Zach Gallen, Nate Eovaldi is the first game pitching matchups on Friday. You ready to predict the series and who you're pulling for?
Ooh, boy, this is a tough one here, Dustin. And you know what? Remember last time I talked about it, I said, hey, you know, my pocketbook because Kyle Schwarber. So I'm going to get my Kyle Schwarber tickets cheap. But then I completely forgot. I'm hoping to go to Texas for opening day. So if Texas wins, that's going to cost me even more money.
Yeah.
So, you know, it is just phenomenal that people are just so quick to dismiss the Diamondbacks after everything they've done. If you've looked at it, they went through Milwaukee, went through the Dodgers, and then the Phillies. I mean, those are some good teams. They've had some good pitching. Texas, you know, beating Tampa Bay, going through Baltimore, which was surprising, and beating Houston. I think that we are I'm hoping at least, that we are in for a great, great World Series. Like I said, these are 2 teams that have fought their way tooth and nail to get there. You know, Texas lost the division right at the end of the season, I think last weekend of the season. And again, Arizona the last to get in, and here they are. Boy, I would say that if I'm taking a look at this, how many games do you think it's going, Dustin? Now let's go there first.
6.
6 games. Mm-hmm. I think it's 6 games too, and I'm going to say that the Rangers are going to take this 4-2, and MVP.
Well, I didn't think that far ahead. Now you're pushing it. I didn't think that far.
All right, we'll cover it next time. But I think 4-2, and I think it'll be the Rangers. But I would say Adolis Garcia is the guy that, you know, I think the 2 guys that you got to look at are Adolis Garcia and Carroll as far as Corbin Carroll Ketel Marte too. But man, there's good players here. That's the thing, you know.
All right, here, if you're betting on it, I would bet on the Diamondbacks. Obviously, it's been an underdog playoffs this year. I would bet the Diamondbacks as far as betting would go. That's where my money would go because of the odds. That's the only reason. I do believe it's going to be the Rangers. It's going to be the Rangers in 6. I'm pulling for the Rangers because the Diamondbacks were part of the reason that the Cubs did not make the postseason. Do you see this stat, Crawly, that outside of the Chicago teams, the Diamondbacks were 76-76.
Wow!
So if you take out the Cubs and the White Sox, 76-76 were the Diamondbacks.
So Chicago basically put Arizona in there. I would say more too, though, is I do have a lot of friends out in Arizona in the Mesa area and stuff like that. And I know a lot of them are very excited. They're Cub fans, but they're also Diamondback fans. When the Cubs play the Diamondbacks, they always root for the Cubs, but the Cubs are not in it. And Arizona is their either hometown or adopted hometown. But all the great people that work around Sloan and the different what do we call it, hot spots that I like to go to around there are really kind of pulling for Arizona. So for that reason alone, I think I want Arizona to win, but I do think it's going to be Texas in 6.
That's a wrap. Don't forget to listen, download, review, and subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Follow the socials, Fly the W on Facebook, Instagram. Of course, we're on Twitter, and you can email us at flythew670@gmail.com. And you can watch us on YouTube by subscribing to the 670 The Score YouTube channel. And who knows, maybe next episode we'll have Kevin and Palatine on board.
One can only wish. Even though we may not agree on everything, we both like to cheer, "Go Cubs!" Hey guys, it's Crawly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Go Cubs!